Hello students, welcome back to the Analyst for 14th May 2024, where we will be discussing 9 most important articles from the Hindu and the Indian Express. The very first article that we'll be discussing today is about the declining poverty ratios and about the various estimations of poverty in the country. In the next one, we'll be looking into India's recent stakes in Iran in their Chabahar port. In the third article, we'll be looking into the crucial aspects and the legal challenges of the live-in relationships in the country. In the fourth article, we'll be looking into the various aspects and concepts of the xenotransplantation. In the fifth article, we'll be looking into smart cities mission and how it has performed over a period of time. And finally, to wrap up the session, we'll be covering 4 more important articles from prelims perspective, and this will be helping you revise news in shorts for the prelims examination, which is upcoming soon. So stay tuned. So students, welcome to the discussion, and today the very first article will be a very important piece of editorial from 2 important economists of the country by the name of C. Rangarajan and S. Mahendra Dev. And let me tell you, these 2 individuals have contributed a lot in poverty studies in the country, and that is why this particular editorial and some parts of the same are very important for your examination point of view. And in this editorial, the authors have argued that in recent times, the poverty levels have decreased over a period of time. And this is a very important piece of editorial for your UPSC prelims, where we have economics and social development. Also, we have seen across various GS papers, GS 1, 2, 3, we have the topic of poverty, right, in various aspects of the syllabus. So that is why from every point of view of GS 1, 2 and 3, this topic is extremely important for your examination. And so, let us begin with the very basics of poverty and understand what the poverty term means in the very first place. See, according to World Bank, poverty is pronounced deprivation in well-being of individuals. That means every individual in the country and also over the world, they need to have some decent aspect of living. They need to have some working conditions, they have to have some family conditions, they have to have some personal conditions. And in that personal condition of various individuals, they need to have good amount of nutrition, they need to have good amount of education, they need to have good amount of income, be it monthly income, be it annual income. So with these resources, they can transform themselves into become some better individual of their own. And that is why you have to understand poverty is the lack of, it is actually deprivation or the lack of access to various important avenues where the individuals should be actually living a basic standard of living. That is a good amount of education services, health services and various other services such as food, shelter, nutrition and so on. So it is the deprivation aspect of the same. And here we have to understand a very important concept in poverty, that is the vicious cycle of poverty. See, we have to understand once an individual becomes poor, or say an individual is coming from a poor household, that means obviously that household is having little access to food and a high amount of unclean water and even less amount of educational health criterias. Now this will be breeding many diseases, infection, lack of energy and skills to actually gain employment in the near future. And this particular thing will be further leading to lower productivity of the individuals. Further lower productivity will be translating into low or little income of the individuals. So you understand, the family started as a poor household and ultimately we find due to various deprivations, the income capabilities of the individuals, they also decline, and this low income leads to low self-esteem, low self-confidence, and this also leads to high childbirths in many households, because the families, the poor families, they often perceive, according to various experts, that having high amount of child or say children in the family, these children will be growing up to actually taking the care of the family, of the various other expenditure to actually uplift their poverty levels. But this also further leads to furthermore poverty because of the various income impairments and the various other issues at the household. So we have to understand, once an household is actually trapped in poverty, this continues in a cycle, and that is what we have to understand. The main aspect of governance and the government schemes in any country must be actually to lift people outside the poverty level, and this can be done at any stage of the cycle. For example, government should be giving more amount of food security, water services, electricity and so on, educational services, health services, right? Government can also help people in this cycle, where government should be scaling people, government should be, say, trying to educate people and giving them employment opportunities. So it is the part of the government to actually lift people out of the poverty. But how can people be lifted out of the poverty by the government? Only when the government has some estimate of who actually are poor and who are not, so that government can easily target those poorer sections of the population. And here a very, very important term comes to our mind, that is the poverty line basket. See, poverty line basket is a kind of mix basket where individuals to actually lead a decent standard of their living, they need to have right amount of nutrition, food and so on. So if we take all the expenses, and we take all the expenses as a sum of, say, for example, 20,000 rupees per month for a particular family to have basic needs fulfilled, so that is actually the poverty line basket, where this is the basket of all the essential and basic minimum needs of human beings. So this is actually referring to the minimum expenditure that a particular household, the poor household, actually needs to spend on to actually come out of poverty. And this can be also reflected from the income that is needed, because we have to understand only calculating the income levels of the poorer sections, it is not sufficient for us to calculate poverty, because apart from incomes, they need to have access to public facilities, electricity, LPG cylinders and so many things. So only based on incomes, we cannot only measure poverty. We have to also look at the expenditures that the poorer people of the country are actually spending upon. And here we have to also look on the consumption expenditure that the people are having in their day-to-day lives, such as the expenditure on food, electricity, education and so on. Now in India, the estimation of poverty is not a new thing. It is actually started from the time when India was not even independent. It started from Dadabhai Naoroji in his famous work, that is Poverty and the Un-British Rule in India, where Dadabhai Naoroji actually criticized the British for the huge number of poorer sections of the population during pre-independent India. So according to him, the poverty line, or the minimum amount of income that the people should be having, was actually 16 rupees to 35 rupees income per person per year. And this is actually based on the cost that Dadabhai Naoroji actually calculated that a person should be having a minimum basic diet upon. That is the cost of vegetables, the cost of ghee, the cost of pulses, the cost of wheat. So these were the 8 or 10 items on which Dadabhai Naoroji actually calculated the poverty line. Please note that the earlier poverty line estimates were actually based only on income levels. So far we have discussed that income levels actually are not sufficient. We have to also look into the expenditure, overall expenditure of the family that is actually needed. Often the income may fall short of the expenditure. So that is why income may not be a particular perfect criteria, but the early estimation in India was actually based on the income level. Gradually we will be seeing that we will be going on to the expenditure criteria. Now the second development in this poverty estimation came from the National Planning Committee in 1938. This was on the recommendations of Jawaharlal Lal Nehru and also Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So they calculated that people should be having a basic minimum income to also fulfill their basic needs. They calculated this income to be in the range of 15 rupees to 20 rupees per person per capita and per annum. And here in the next phase, the Bombay plan, which was actually a plan by the leading industrialists in the Bombay region, it was proposed in 1944, and they also suggested a poverty line that is of 75 per capita per year. So these were all the estimates based on income levels before independence. Now after independence, post independence, we see that poverty estimation took a national circle, and the economists and also the policy makers at the national level, they started estimation of poverty, and it started with the Planning Commission expert group in 1962. Now, for the very first time in the country, poverty levels were divided into rural poverty lines and urban poverty lines. And here, this was also based on the income criteria. That is the minimum income that the people must be having to fulfill their basic needs. It was 20 rupees in the rural areas and 25 rupees in the urban areas per capita per year. So, it started for the very first time by dividing the urban and the rural areas and their individual poverty lines. Now, VM Dandekar and N. Rath, right, also popularly known as Dandekar and Rath Committee, in 1971, they recommended for the very first time this expenditure method based poverty line estimation. And for this, the committee recommended that in India, the people must be consuming 2250 calories per month. And this is a very, very important deviation from the previous lines, because firstly we see that the income method of poverty line estimation is now being to be done with. Now this expenditure method is actually brought in because we have to understand what are the minimum expenditure that the people should be having to spend their calories and energy on. So this will be also looking into the various aspects of their nutrition, well-being, food security and everything. Now, in the next one, the Alag Committee in 1979, it further strengthened the norms of nutritional requirements of the people and also based this particular consumption expenditure on the inflation level. That means, according to the last estimate, now after around 8 years, these particular poverty lines were actually revised according to the inflation that was actually taking place in the country. Next, the Ladkawala Committee in 1993, it suggested state-specific poverty lines for the very first time, because it has been seen there were some states in which the poverty lines were actually much more higher. Or that means the states were overall on a general basis were more prosperous than some other states such as Bihar and various other areas of Madhya Pradesh and so on. So we find that for the very first time in the country, we find a state-specific poverty line based on CPI, Consumer Price Index, industrial workers and consumer price index, agricultural laborers. So we find that further that inflation indexing has been strengthened using rural and say the industrial workers criteria. Now again this has been strengthened further. Now we find the latest amount of poverty estimation that has been undertaken by Tendulkar Committee and the Rangarajan Committee. And please note that the Rangarajan Committee itself, right, the author itself is the author of the editorial. Now, according to Tendulkar Committee, to begin with, it was established in 2009 to actually update the Ladkawala Committee recommendations on poverty. Now, what Tendulkar Committee did, it directly shifted from the calorie consumption, which was actually followed on previously. It shifted from that to a uniform poverty line basket all over the country. So it divided the poverty line into two types, that is the urban poverty and the rural poverty, right? And here the Tendulkar Committee suggested for every state, right, the rural areas should be having around a monthly consumption, minimum monthly consumption expenditure of 446 rupees around, and urban area should be having around 578 rupees monthly consumption. So below this anyone will be poorer, above this anyone will be above the poverty line. So it shifted from the calorie norms that we have also seen. Now it also shifted from a type of a poverty estimation method that is known as uniform resource period, which was actually followed by the previous committees. Now uniform resource period actually it means that whenever the government would go on to survey the amount of poorer sections of the population, they would be asking what were the main amounts of items that the poorer sections of the population consumed in the last 30 days. Now Tendulkar Committee added something more above the Ladkawala group, that is, it added 5 low frequency items such as clothing, footwear, durables, education and institutional health expenditure to the same. So this is actually known as the mixed reference period, which is actually the 5 low frequency items plus also the uniform resource period. So this is one of the criticisms where even this article is discussing that this is actually nothing new. This is actually just following the last method, but it has just modified some things here and there. So this is also one of the reasons why the poverty estimation and the poverty rate that that was derived in the Tendulkar committee estimation in here, it came to be around at all India level 21.9%, right? So, and also the individual rural and urban poverty levels came up to be 25 and 13% respectively. Now, according to this, the poverty rates back in 2009, it came to be very low according to various experts, and this actually started a debate. Now, after this debate, the government back then instituted this Rangarajan committee after 2010. And this committee again looked at poverty calculations from the very fresh perspective. Now, this committee went back to the calorie expenditure criteria, and it further brought in calories, protein and fat consumption of the people based on the urban areas and the rural areas. And also with reference to protein, fat and so on, we also see these were the minimum criteria which were given. But you need not memorize everything. Just remember that the rural component is actually more than the urban component, because rural people actually work much more harder. They have to do farming, they have to do non-farming works and so on. That is why they need a little bit of more calories and so on. So it recommended this one firstly. Second, it also recommended a state-wise poverty threshold at the national level. The urban areas should be having 47 rupees monthly minimum expenditure. That is, this is the poverty line for the urban areas, and this is the poverty line for the rural areas. Also, it also changed the earlier mixed reference period by modifying it, by giving it the name of modified mixed reference period, by dividing the amount of expenditures that the people did over a period of say 365 days, 7 days and 30 days. So in this method, the estimates were actually based on the expenditure that the people did in the last 1 year, based on say the durable goods, right? For example, say any transportation, any new cars, motor bicycles, or any big expenditures. Next, in the 7 days duration, they were asked about the recent food expenditures that they actually made. And finally, on the 30 days duration, they asked the people what were the rent or what were the taxes that they paid to the government. So these were actually the mixed reference period, modified mixed reference period, on which the people were actually asked an individual assist to come at this poverty line. So based on the answers that the surveys received here, so based on that, only this poverty line was calculated. And based on the same, we see that according to Rangarajan group, we see that the overall all India poverty level comes to be much more higher than what the Tendulkar committee suggested at 29.5%. Right? So we understand this was the main deviation from the Tendulkar committee recommendation. And here, recently, as we find, the Niti Aayog also publishes this multidimensional poverty index, where it has 3 big criteria. Firstly, health, education and standard of living. So these are the criteria where the Niti Aayog will be looking at the various households of the population, where if the households are missing even on one criteria here, they will be known as multi-dimensionally poor. Because according to Niti Aayog, right, we have to also understand that this is the approach of multi-dimensional poverty index, where we have various dimensions of poverty, such as health poverty, education poverty and also standard of living poverty. That means, further, if we look into the various other indicators and their weightages, we find between health, we have nutrition, child and adolescent mortality rates, maternal health. We have under education, years of schooling, school attendance. We have under standard of living, the access of individuals to cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, housing, electricity, assets and even one bank account. So even if individuals are missing on these things, that person will be counted as multi-dimensionally poor. And as we can see here, these are the individual states in the country as of now with the highest amount of MPI or multidimensionally poor populations, or populations where at least one of the indicators here they are lacking within the same. But it is a good thing that over 2005 to presently, it is estimated that the amount of multidimensionally poor individuals have declined to be around 11.28%. And if we find that there is a steep decline in the overall absolute poverty level, that is a poverty headcount ratio, or the number of poor individuals in the country, as we can see here. And also around 24.82 individuals have estimated to escape multidimensional poverty in the last 8 to 9 years. And also all of the individuals also saw an improvement over the 12 indicators of sustainable development goal. And this is the another set of data that this editorial is also talking about, that is known as the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, which is released every 5 years by the NSO under Ministry of Statistics Program Implementation. Now it has, according to this report, we can see over a decade, right, over a decade, the consumption expenditure of the people have increased more than 2 times, as we can compare from 1999 to 2000s to 2022 to 2023. The expenditure has increased twice, around 2.5x, right? And also we see that the households right now in the country are actually spending lesser amount of expenditure than they did in 2011. That is the last time that this report was actually published. And in the recent times, we find that both in the rural areas and the urban areas, that the people are actually spending lesser amount of their income on their food. This means that maybe their overall income has increased, and that is why out of the overall income, increased overall income, they're actually spending a little amount on their on the food expenditure. Also, if you see the amount of social welfare schemes that is provided by the government, this is actually lifting their incomes. If we compare, if we look at the final value, which is including their own incomes and also the social expenditures that is done by the government on them. So this is the data that we find. And also the other kind of data that is shown here, it is extremely important for your mains value addition points. Now here, the rural poverty has actually declined over a period of time. The same can be told for the urban poverty. Now, according to the latest data from the Household Consumption Expenditure Survey, we can also revise the previous Rangarajan and Tendulkar Committee recommendation according to their methodologies. According to Rangarajan methodology, we find that poverty right now is around 10% according to Rangarajan methodology, right? That is, it decreased by around 1.77% per year. According to Tendulkar Committee, the poverty is actually 3%, and this is actually meaning that the poverty has declined by around 1.72% per year. So please remember this data if you have to compare the various recommendations and their various policies. Now here, according to the latest data from a survey which was done by Subramaniam and noted economists on inequalities, as we find that the Gini coefficient, please note down that Gini coefficient, the lower the value of the Gini coefficient, it is the better. That means the lower the Gini coefficient, the more equal the society is. And also, if you find in rural and urban areas from 2011 to right now, the Gini coefficient has decreased over a period of time. Now here, this we have to see in the context of the reasons why what actually led to the decrease in the overall poverty level. Now here, the government has actually a large amount of program which is known as the National Food Security Act, which actually provides 75% of the rural population and 50% of the urban population subsidized food grains. And here we also find that these food grains are available at the public distribution system rations shops, right? Apart from this, under the same National Food Security Act, we also have the midday meal scheme where school going children, right, are actually given nutritious food. And also we have to talk about the integrated child development scheme, where we have the provisions of Anganwadis, right, where the early child development and the early phases of the development of the children is actually taken care of. Next, we also have this National Rural Livelihood Mission, or the Ajivika scheme, which is actually to try to promote more and more self-help groups in the country to actually give more and more empowerment and employment to the women in the rural areas. Next, we also have this Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojana. Kaushal Vikas Yojana is actually to actually skill and empower the local youth and the youth of the country who are generally dropouts of say class 10 and 12 to actually make them employable. Next, we also have the Manrega program, where the government is actually giving 100 days of paid unskilled labor to the rural areas, right? So this is also giving a lot of employment opportunity to increase their income levels. We also have this Pradhan Mantri Jan Arogya Yojana to limit the out-of-pocket expenditure of the individuals by giving health insurance to the below poverty line individuals. We also have this Pradhan Mantri Ujjwala Yojana, where 14.2 liters of cylinder, right, LPG cylinders is actually given at a subsidy of 300 rupees, and also to extremely poorer households, the cylinders are given free of cost. Then we also have this Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Yojana, which was actually launched during the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, where be it assistance to the older citizens, or the free provision of pulses and additional subsidies and rations to the individuals, it was comprehensively covered during the COVID pandemic. Apart from this, we also have this Atal Pension Yojana, where individuals from 18 years of age to 40 years of age, they can sign up for pension and they can get unlimited pension benefits after the same, according to the income or say the premium that they have deposited. Now in the comments, let me tell 3 more poverty alleviating measures that has been taken by the government of India. Now here at the very end, we have a mains PYQ question from 2015. It is asking you that though there have been several different estimates of poverty in India, all indicate reduction in poverty levels over time. Do you agree? Critical examine with reference to the urban and rural poverty indicators. Now I want all of you to attempt this question very briefly in the comment section and let me know what do you think of the answer here. In the next one, we'll be looking at India's recent interests in the Chabahar port of Iran, because recently India and Iran has signed a contract for the operation of a terminal at the strategically important Chabahar port in Iran. Now this is a very important section for your syllabus, where we have for economic aspirations of the prelims examination. For GS2 we have bilateral and regional groupings and India's interest within the same, and also for GS3 we have infrastructure and within it the ports here. So please be very comprehensive while we are actually understanding any news in great depth. And here recently what happened is Chabahar, which is a port in the Sistan Baluchistan province of Iran, which is a deep water port, and this port is giving India access to large amount of cargo ships across the region. So recently India signed a 10-year port terminal operation contract. That means all the port related operations, be it related to the various port equipments, be it related with the say massive ships from India, and also the various commercial day-to-day operations of the port, those will be taken over by India Ports Global Limited in partnership with Ports and Maritime Organization of Iran. Now more to talk about India Ports Global Limited. This is a joint ventureship between Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust and the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Port Authority of the country, which is 100% owned by the Ministry of Shipping and Ports, right? So this is actually a government entity which is trying to regulate the overseas Indian port operations. So this is a very strategically important authority in the country too. And here the other commitments in the deal will be regarding this IPGL, which will be investing around $120 million in India's and between Iran's Chabahar port. And additionally, India will be also given extra credit of $250 million for the port infrastructure and the various port amenities within the same. Now, this is also not the very first time when India got the port operations contract in the surrounding neighborhood. Also, recently we found that in the Sidway port of Myanmar, under the Kaladan multimodal transit transport, which actually starts from Kolkata via the Hooghly River over a sea route of around 540 kilometers to Myanmar Seatway. And this actually is the transit transportation port which is trying to connect Kolkata to Aizawl in the northeast region of the country. So this we find this is actually not the very first time when a foreign country gave its port operation to the country. This is the second time when this happened. And here in this particular deal, India will be supplying major shipping harbor cranes and various other sensitive equipments. And here India will be operating the various terminal, right? And this is a very strategic acquisition for the country too. Now here we have to look at the very brief history of the Chabahar port and also India's involvement in the same. Now you see, apart from the Kandla port in Gujarat, Chabahar port is just around 500 nautical miles away. And here we have to understand that Chabahar port is very strategically important because it will be giving the access to the further Central Asia, to access to Afghanistan, because we have to understand in between we have Pakistan, which is with whom we have a land blockade. That means whatever the ships or whatever the various land cargo, land movement that we have over Pakistan, it is not possible, right, due to obvious reasons. And that is why India must be finding a suitable way, and nothing more better than this Chabahar port, which is just located away the coast of Gujarat. And here, apart from chemical fertilizers fertilizers imports and various other minerals from Afghanistan and other parts of Europe and so on. This port is very, very important strategically for the country. Now, for the very first time in 2002, India and Iran went into talks over this over the Chabahar port and development of the port, because India wanted to bypass the Gwadar port that is in Pakistan. So India and also Iran wanted to develop the Chabahar port as an alternative to the Gwadar port, where India cannot access the sea. Next, in 2003, right, an ambitious roadmap was actually signed by our own Prime Minister back then, and here the strategic cooperation actually thought of linking the Central Asia, Europe, Russia with the Chabahar port, and from the Chabahar port back to India. So this linking was actually found out, and also the strong economic relationship that developed over a period of time between Iran and India also led to this cooperation. Next, we have to understand, over a period of time, the tensions between US and Iran, they deteriorated, right? We have to understand the relations when they deteriorated between Iran and US, right? And also when US called Iran being a nexus of evil apart from North Korea and Iraq, right? The Indian authorities, the diplomats in New Delhi, they became very cautious about US's approach, and that is when the relations with Iran and India actually also deteriorated a little bit. But after 2015, during the Obama administration in the US, the progress actually improved over a period of time, with India committing around $100 million to build a road from Delaram, Afghanistan to Jajranj. So this is in Iran, and this road was actually conceptualized to connect Afghanistan to Iran and further to Chabahar port. But the main aspect of this road is actually it has run into many delays as of now too. And also, after this P5+1 deal, that is P5 members of the United Security countries, the permanent 5 members, and +1 means Germany here, they also signed a comprehensive nuclear framework with Iran, easing the tensions a little bit, improving the relations between Europe, US and the Iran a little bit. And in May 2016, the trilateral framework or agreement between Afghanistan, Iran and India was formed, when this international transport and transit corridor was also conceptualized, which we'll be also looking into the next slide. But in recent times, after 2015 or 2017 and so on, after Donald Trump came as the president of the US, and also aggressiveness of China increase, we have to understand these all led to a complex interplay of India's relationships with Iran. And here at the center, Chabahar Fort was also suffering a lot of delays apart from the commitments India did in the past. And that is why in recent times, India has to diversify its partners. And that is why over a period of time, over the last 2-3 years, the port equipments and the various infrastructure investments that India is doing at Chabahar Port, it has amounted to more than $25 million. And this is a very welcome sign for the region too. And also, according to India Ports Authority and also the various missions in India to promote ports and shipping in Iran, we have to understand that India set up this India Ports Global Chabahar Free Zone since 2018, and India has been trying to control the various ports operations with mutual consent from both of the nations. Apart from this, in recent times, we also have seen massive amount of humanitarian assistance during the COVID pandemic, when the vaccines were actually supplied through this port, Chabahar port, from India to the rest of the European nations and also to Iran and Afghanistan. We also have seen during the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan in 2021. Since then, India supplied more than 2 million tons of weight and pulses to the Afghanistan region, giving humanitarian assistance. Also in recent times, India has been supplying Iran with malathion drug, which is actually a drug to treat mosquito-borne diseases in the country. So we have to understand the importance of Chabahar Port is very, very important. Apart from this, Chabahar Port is actually at the center of a very important mission that was also stated before, that is the International North-South Transport Corridor. Now this was actually an idea which was conceptualized by Russia, India and Iran, which is actually linking Mumbai, that is India, via the Bandar-e-Abbas in Iran, through various ports and towns and various cities of Central Asia from Iran, and further into Russia. The main aim is actually to reduce the earlier transit period via the Red Sea and the Mediterranean Ocean to connect St. Petersburg in Russia. So idea is to totally cut down the transit time. Earlier, which it is used to take place around 60 days, right now it will be taking place only 30 days, that is half the time. So this is also another strategic importance for India to actually consider developing the Chabahar port. And here India can also gain access to the landlocked Central Asian countries, where China is also trying to spread its tentacles by giving more and more debt, and also strangle the Central Asian countries such as Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, and the various other Kyrgyzstan and the various other Central Asian nations. So they are becoming more and more dependent on China. So India can, through this network and through the development of Chabahar port, can gain access to the Central Asian countries, because through Pakistan above the Himalayas we cannot do so. We have to do so by going through the Chabahar port using this particular network. And finally, we have to also understand New Delhi has to very cautiously walk over the global tensions around happening in the region. For example, the issues which are taking place in the Israel-Palestine region and also in the Russia-Ukraine region. So India must also be cautiously and calibrating the particular tensions in the region, and particularly develop Chabahar port as an alternative to the marine transportation and also to the overroad transportation in the region. In the next article, we'll be looking into the various aspects of live-in relationships and the legal positions in the same. Because recently the Allahabad High Court has ruled that Muslims in live-in relationships with living spouses, they cannot claim any rights under their own religion of Islam for the live-in relationships. And this is a very, very important aspect for UPSC with respect to GS1, where we have the salient features of Indian society and also the effects of globalization on Indian society. And also GS2, where we have Indian constitution and the various features of the same, such as the fundamental rights of the individuals. Now here, we have to understand that marriage is a sacred bond between two consenting individuals, and over a period of time, since the Vedic times, over the various ancient and medieval and the modern times, marriage has also evolved like every other societal customs. Like the times, right, the times are bound to change, and even sometimes the social norms, the social customs, they also evolve over a period of time. So right now we find that there is a growing trend of live-in relationships in the country, not in the country but in the overall global arena too. And this is due to the changing perceptions of the people on marriages. Now, if we try to attempt to define live-in relationships, it is an arrangement of living where under the couples which are actually who actually are unmarried, they live together to conduct a long-going relationship similarly as in marriage. So what happens in live-in relationships is that the individuals who are actually living together or cohabiting together, right, they do not actually consent to any contracts of any marriage, or they do not even register under any rule or any norms or laws of the country, and they try to live together, and they live together similar to a fashion that is seen in a marriage, right? So here, if we look at the attitudes of the of Indians with reference to marriage, live-in relationships and dating, we find that according to Indians, around 11% of Indians, they approve live-in relationships, right? And if we look into the causes of living relationships, we find that this is a global phenomena which is actually gaining influence over a period of time. In India, we find that due to globalization aspects, where in Western countries living relationships are actually very common, it is actually also much accepted by the parents and the various relatives of the individuals who are actually living together, right? This particular aspect of globalization and the spreading of the global culture, social norms and so on, these are actually the things which are coming into India via this globalization norms. Next, also we find that India is going through rapid urbanization due to educational reasons, due to professional reasons. Individuals migrate and live away from their family, apart from their hometown. So in the urban areas, when they find some suitable partners, they tend to live together with their partners. This can be also seen as a position where, due to increased urbanization, people are actually having very, very limited contact with their particular families, and hence they're also living together in the same. Next, there are some individuals in the society who do not want to be constrained with the various norms and the sacrifices and the various rules and regulations of marriage. So that is what they need, more and more freedom. They need least amount of responsibilities from marriage side, from familial side, and whatever responsibility the partners have with each other, they are satisfied with themselves. So that is another aspect where an increasing amount of Indians, they also feel the same. Next, some individuals, before they get married, they also look for live-in because they want to see how they actually span out and how the partners, how their own partners they actually span out over a couple of months or a couple of years before they actually get actually married. And finally, due to social media, due to various influences that the individuals are seeing across in the society, many individuals now think that it is a normal thing to actually practice and actually also propagate in the society. So due to influence also, these are the things which are happening in the nation as of now. Now here, we have to understand that there are many stakeholders when we talk about live-in relationships. Firstly, the partners themselves are a particular stakeholder, right, who are actually living together. Then their parents are also one of the stakeholders, because we have to understand in Indian society, the parents and also the many of the generations of the Indian society, they did not yet accept the live-in relationship reality in the country, right? While the youngsters of the population, they actually feel fine to go away with live-in relationships, but the parents and the various relatives, right, they do not say consent to this live-in relations most of the time. Then also we have the law enforcement authorities or the police, where also sometimes we have seen that the interference of the police authorities in the personal life of the living partners, it has come to various issues in the recent times. And here, that is why we have to look at this particular debate from legal angle. Now, according to the various laws and regulations in the country, we do not have any provision for live-in relationships according to any Indian law. But under the constitution, we have Article 19, which is actually guaranteeing the freedom of speech and expression. And herein, many individuals claim that this is a fundamental right of the individuals to actually be with the people according to their fundamental right. Then also according to Article 21, which guarantees the personal liberty of the individuals, this is actually the main aspect where the individuals argue that since they have the personal liberty of choosing their partners and also to live with the same, this is also guaranteed under various Supreme Court cases, under D.D. Patel case of 2014 and also Khushbu case of 2010. So in this particular legal angles, we will be seeing many Supreme Court cases where also the Supreme Court over a period of time has said that live-in relationships are not illegal. For example, in a case from 1978, right, where it is the case of Badri Prasad, 1978, the Supreme Court has told that live-in relationships are entirely legal. There is nothing illegal with the same. Then again in the Lata Singh case of 2006, the Supreme Court again reaffirmed the earlier judgment that live-in relationships are not legal. They have nothing illegal within the same. If the individuals are actually consenting to each other, right, they also have appropriate age and also they are of sound mind to actually make their own decisions, right, because they are actually full-grown adults. In the Supreme Court case of 2010, Supreme Court actually outline various guidelines for live-in relationships. Firstly, the partners must be akin to the spouses or wives under or husbands under marriages. They must be of legal age to marry, and also they must be voluntarily cohabiting with each other without any force under any of the partners. So these were the main criteria to actually understand what a live-in relationship is actually. Then according to Indra Sharma case of 2013, right, the Supreme Court extended the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act, right, against women to the live-in relationship couples also. That means the women under relationships, they will be also protected under Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. Next, we also have this case where that the children who are actually who have actually been born within the live-in relationships, they will be also having inheritance rights of their particular parents, right? And finally, the maintenance rights of particular individuals, particularly women, will also have to be given according to Indian judiciary under section 125 of the CRPC. So these are all the important things that we have to understand when we talk about live-in relationships. Now let us look into the writ petition case of this particular news article. Now there are two individuals, Sneha Devi and Mohammad Shadab Khan. Now these two individuals were living together, and according to the case details, it is found out Shadab Khan was married. So that is as Allahabad High Court observed that Islamic tenets do not permit live-in relationships during the substating marriage. That means Shadab Khan was actually married, and that is why this person cannot live together with another partner, and this is also against the Islamic tenets. And here a very important aspect of constitutional morality versus social morality has been brought out. The Supreme Court told that in this case live-in relationships cannot be permitted. It is accepted because there is a previous marriage that is taking place. But here we have to understand living relationships on an entirety. It is not illegal because we have the constitutional moral values of individual liberty, freedom of expression, right to equality, social justice, rule of law, due process of law, and also the various values under the preambles. So we have the constitutional morality of protecting the individual. So the individual, if it desires to be in a live-in relationships, it is entirely guaranteed under Article 21 under personal liberty, right? Provision of the Article 21 of the Indian Constitution. So it is perfectly guaranteed under the same, right? But if an individual is married, that person cannot get the same. And also at times when constitutional morality is clashing with social morality, sometimes in some cases it has been seen that constitutional morality is more important than social morality, because in this case, if two adults are consenting and living together in live-in relationships and they are respecting their privacy and personal rights, now the society or the societal morality, they need to be evolving over a period of time, because the constitution guarantees the individual rights to them, right? So the parents and so on, the various allegations and the various issues that they have, they must be at a lower pedestal apart from the constitutional rights that the individuals are having. And this is also accorded in a very important case known as Payal Sharma versus Nadi Niketan 2001 case, where it has been said in the case that a man and a woman without getting married can live together if they wish to. This may be regarded as immoral by the society, but it is not illegal. There is a difference between law and morality that we have to understand here, right? So these are all the important arguments that you can use to address this question, these practice questions, where the question is live-in relationships are the product of an evolving society. Highlight various key judgments of the Supreme Court of India in this regard, and I also again want all of your answers in the comment. Write very brief answers. So write very brief answers in the comment section. So let me also see how you all are answering in the same. In the next article, we'll be looking at a very interesting event which actually took place. Recently, the very first human patient who was actually a recipient of pig kidney transplant has actually died. But his family members have told this is not due to their kidney transplant death, this is due to natural reasons. Now, a concept which is known as Xenotransplantation is very important in this article. Very, very important for UPSC Prelims, where we have the general science, and also GS3 where we have science and technology, developments and their applications in daily life. Now here, we have to understand that human beings, they sometimes require organs, tissues to be transplanted because their own organs, tissues are maybe not working. So any amount of transplantation, implantation or infusion of organ cells, tissues can be done, right, artificially sometimes. This can be done by using live cells, tissues or organs from a non-human animal cells or source such as pigs, right? And also sometimes ex vivo contact, that means the human body cells, fluids and organs, they are sometimes grown outside the body, right? They are sometimes grown outside the body, perhaps in a tissue culture, perhaps in a cell culture, perhaps in a test tube and so on. So we have to understand for this concept of xenotransplantation, the main aspect of organ donation and transplantation is very, very important, because according to Nature 2024, it has been seen that more than 90,000 patients are waiting for kidney transplants around the world. And also this technology is possible because of a gene editing technology known as CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Now see, imagine that someone is actually having a faulty kidney, and that person has to be treated of the same by giving the person a new kidney. Now where we will be getting a new kidney, because already these many people are waiting. Now scientists have come with a solution that we can use pigs for the organs that we need in various patients. Now how it takes place is that pigs organs and the various entities that they have, for example heart, kidneys, liver and lungs and so on, they're actually very very close to human organs and the size and the composition of the same. So pigs are the best source from where we can source the organ. But we have to understand our own human immune system, whenever it will be receiving a foreign animal's organ, it will be having a high chance of rejection of the particular organ. So that is why we have to identify a gene which is actually responsible for rejecting any particular organs. So that gene has been identified in the pigs, known as GGTA gene. Now scientists have done what? They have isolated this pig DNA, they have identified where this gene is, and using CRISPR-Cas9, which is a kind of a molecular Caesar, so the scientists have cut out that gene and it had replaced the gene with another gene which is making the particular pig DNA and the chromosomes very very receptive for human organ transplantation. And after the molecular Caesar cut has been done using CRISPR-Cas9, which is a molecular protein, the scientists have replaced the gene in the tissue culture. Now this cell will be multiplying and these cells will be fed into an unfertilized egg of the pig, and this pig will be inserted in a female pig. Now this pig will be giving birth to many piglets, and when the piglets will be growing into a full grown pigs, now this pig will be having those organs which the human being's immune system is actually compatible with. So this is how this technology is actually working on, and this is a very very recent technology as of now. More developments will be coming in the future. Now there can be some issues, complications in the same. Firstly, we have seen that the human body themselves have some natural immunity to reject foreign substances. So there is always this risk even after this gene editing. Next, there is also a potential infection due to the various immune related response bodies and so on. Also due to various surgeries and the procedures involved in the same, right? There are issues of the infections in the same. Next, also we have seen that there can be many cross species infection by retroviruses. For example, a pig and their organs are obviously prone to diseases, maybe some birds and so on, but naturally the viruses and the diseases, they do not spread to human beings. But when these pigs organs are actually transplanted into human beings, now they will be again prone to these kind of diseases which were naturally not transmitted to human beings. So these are some of the concerns where the scientific community needs to address the same here. In the next article, we'll be looking into the overall success and the aspects of the smart cities mission in the country. And this is a very very important aspect for UPSC prelims: economic and social development, GS1 urbanization and GS3 infrastructure, parts of the syllabus. Now here, to define smart cities, we have to have a proper country definition, because this can be a potential question asked by UPSC. Now, smart cities actually are termed as new Silicon Valleys, where we have the latest state of technology and various urban amenities. And this is actually built with a strong integration of airports, highways and other types of communications, or so-called intellectual city with advanced information communication technologies. As we can also see here, there can be many amounts of e-governance initiatives, waste management, water management, energy management, urban transportation, mobility and various other facilities too, which will be making this city very very smart and technologically oriented. Now for the very first time, Smart Cities Mission was actually launched in 2015, where 100 cities across the country were actually shortlisted to be developed into smart cities. While a formal definition of smart city was not conceptualized, but the concepts and also the programs of smart city was also there in a particular scheme known as Jawaharlal Nehru National Urban Renewable Mission. Now here, some of the aspects of JNNURM is also found in smart city mission, where initially 100 cities were to be developed as smart cities by 2020. Right now the target is extended to 2024. The aspects of smart city mission is actually of two-pronged. Firstly, there will be area-based development, where the redevelopment of the city will be done, where city will be totally renewed, the various facilities will be renewed. Retrofitting will be done, where cities facilities will be improved, existing facilities such as water services, waste management services, they will be improved. And also greenfield projects will also be done, where the new areas around the cities, the semi-rural areas around the cities, they will be also developed, which are known as greenfield projects. They will be started from fresh. And also there will be smart city operations based on information communication technology. And also apart from this, a special purpose vehicle under Companies Act has been formed, where a bureaucrat, mainly IAS and various other bureaucrats, officials will be appointed, or a multinational company will be assigned to actually oversee the implementation of the special purpose vehicle, which is actually set up under the Companies Act. Now, here we have to look at the status and the issues of the smart cities mission. Now, according to the latest data from the Urban Ministry's dashboard, we find that around 900 projects are still pending, right? They are still ongoing. Around 400 projects are estimated to be delayed beyond 2024 deadline. And also less than 5% of the projects have actually come through the PPP route, or the public-private partnerships. And smart cities mission has also become an exclusionary scene, because in the effort to develop Chandigarh as a smart city, it has been seen that almost all of the funds of Chandigarh smart city has been just spent in pocket sector 43 of the Chandigarh city itself. So rest of the city is not developed. Only one portion of the city is been developed, and also this has been seen across the many other cities also. It has been seen that Madurai is the only smart city which has been completed, and rest of the cities are yet to be completed, and only 10 cities here have completed 90% of the projection. We have seen that most of the cities and the values of the projections and so on, they are still lagging, and mostly we have seen that the northeastern states and the union territories, they are actually lacking. For followed from Meghalaya, Puducherry, Mizoram and so on, they are actually the states which are lacking. And the top 5 states are actually Rajasthan, Odisha, Karnataka, who have implemented well, but we have seen that on an average only 67% of the national average has been completed. Also, according to McKinsey report, right, it has been estimated that capital expenditure of around $1.2 trillion is required by 2030 in Indian cities, and this is actually more than 1.6 lakh crore, less than $20 billion in the next 9 years. So we have to understand the funds for the smart city missions are actually far more lower. According to World Bank, 49% of urban areas live in slums, and smart city missions as of now has done very little to develop the slums even. Then this special purpose vehicle, which is actually managed by the multinational companies or say bureaucrats, they also have many issues with the local municipal boards, right, where the elected municipal authorities, they do not have substantial power on the development of the planning of the smart city missions. Next, also it has been seen that in areas where the smart city initiatives has been conducted, we have seen that these areas are now become more and more prone to flooding due to incomplete projects, delays and so on. So these are the various things that you can incorporate in your mains answers, the various data with the various points to make your points more value additive. Now finally, we'll be looking at 4 important prelim snippets. Firstly, we'll be starting with International Court of Justice. This is actually, established in June 1945 by the San Francisco Conference, which also created the United Nations. The seat of the court is actually at the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands, and the official language is actually French and English. It started operation in 1946, and right now it is composed of 15 judges elected by the United Nations General Assembly and the Security Council. Very, very important facts for your UPSC prelims. It is also known as the World Court and is a successor to the earlier League of Nations Court, which was known as the Permanent Court of International Justice. So the earlier name was this. The jurisdiction is actually the legal disputes between the various states, and the states here are actually the various UN members and the rest of the sovereign countries. It also issues advisory opinions on various legal questions at the request of UN organs and the specialized United Nations agencies, and also it functions on the various international laws, treaties and established customs, right? So these are all the important information for your ICG. In the next one, we'll be looking at recent Twitter posts by Nirmala Sitharaman, our present finance minister, on the position of the government debt in the country. We'll be looking at the most important data here, the most recent data here, according to the center and the states, liabilities as a percentage of GDP. As we can see in the figure here, we are here as of now at 82% of the GDP, where we are talking about the entire government liabilities. Now, what are the government liabilities all about? It is composed of two types. Firstly, the public debt. Ignore this figure. This is the figure from 2019 levels. Right now, the figure is actually updated to 82% here, as we can see here. So we can see, as of now, the public debt is divided into two types: internal debt and external debt. And internal debt is covering around dated securities, treasury bills, 14-day intermediate T-bills, and the various other, say, debt obligations of the central government and the state government combined. The external debt is actually the money that the central and the state government is actually borrowing from the rest of the world. It can be in rupees, it can be in dollars, it can be in any other currencies. Then we have the public account, where we have the national small savings schemes, state provident fund, other accounts and reserve funds and other deposits, which is actually a liability for the government to keep the public deposits safe. So both of them are actually known as the government liabilities. So we can see here the total central government and state government liabilities around 82%, right? And also we can see that over a period of 1, 2 and 3 years, the last 3 years, right, they have consistently declined. And also we can see the central government liabilities, a percent of GDP, right now it is around at 58%. And also we can see the central government liabilities, they have also over a period of last 3 years have decreased over a period of time. It increased recently over the last 4-5 years on the head of COVID pandemic, and right now we see that the thing, liabilities are actually decreasing. Most of the debt, external debt of the country and also of the central government is actually rupee denominated. So the finance minister in her tweets is actually talking about the less amount of foreign currency risk, because most of the debt is denominated in our own currency. It is not dependent on the foreign currency fluctuations. And also most of the debt is actually over a long period of time, right? Say over an average period of 12 years. So there is a very less amount of rollover risk or default risk by the government, because long-term loans are actually more easy for the government to repay back apart from the short-term loans. So that is why rollover risk means default risk is actually much more lower. In the next one, we'll be looking at India International Bullion Exchange, where this was announced in the Union Budget 2020, and it is located at Gujarat International Finance Tech City under the International Financial Services Center, or IFSC. So this is actually streamlining gold imports and the jewelry market of gold in the country, and also not of gold on various precious bullion metals such as silver, gold and so on. So here we have the sellers and the buyers who will be having high amounts of safety and standards with reference to the gold and the various bullion exchange across the country and also over the world. Now over the world, China is the country who is having the largest bullion exchange in the world, right? So that is why India is also trying to emulate that model. Main significance is that the price discovery of the various crucial bullion will be totally facilitated, because this is actually done online on an exchange medium. It is also responsible for various authentic sources of original purity of gold, silver and so on. It will be also leading to financialization of gold by actually converting the various assets of gold that the people, Indians, are having, by converting them into financial assets. It will be also leading to greater import efficiency by registering authorized jewelers, and also leading to global benchmarking of Indian gold in the international markets. Now finally we'll be looking at semal trees, which is actually also known as silk cotton trees, or Bombax ceiba, the scientific name of the sea. The main habitat, they can be found in tropical and subtropical regions of Asia, Africa and Latin America. Now recently it has been found that in areas of Rajasthan, particularly after Holika Dahan, it has been seen that the parts of the trees are actually being used as ritual sacrifices during the particular festivals, and that is why the amount of trees in this particular region of Semal trees, this has been going down. So that is why we have to understand the main ambition of the society must be to conserve the same. That is why Semal Conservation Mission is actually hosted to actually save the tree from the conservation, because these trees have various cultural say significance for some tribal populations who also say consume the semal fruits for its medicinal properties, and also it also leads to the conservation of the wild animals in the forests too. So these were all the important articles in today's Analyst. I thank you all for being a very patient audience. Please do attempt the quiz which is following up. Till we meet again, thank you very much.